Welcome to RuralStrong, where we talk real challenges and bold solutions in rural economic development. I'm your host, Joe Barker. Let's get into it. Welcome to RuralStrong. This is your podcast host, Joe Barker, and we're broadcasting today from the RuralStrong podcast studio in beautiful downtown Jackson, Tennessee. And we've got a very interesting guest today, Dr. Maree Forbes Gaughan, and she is the Chief Strategist and CEO of the National Travel Center, an organization she founded to drive sustainable economic development and tourism in local communities. With over 35 years of industry experience, she works at the intersection of tourism advocacy, strategic planning, and education. Maree, welcome to RuralStrong.
Thank you, Joe. I'm also now, as of last fall, the CEO of Community Economic Partners.
Oh, well, great. Well,
yeah, several of us got together and decided that that's pretty much what we were doing, including Deb Brown, who I know you know.
Yes.
And realized that we could help small communities, small towns, rural communities more effectively if we move beyond tourism. I worked at the World Bank right out of graduate school, and that made me had to learn economic development in order to do for them what they hired me to do. So part of my background from a long time ago that I pulled forward and enjoying it thoroughly. We get to meet some of the most wonderful people in the country.
Well, I love to talk about tourism. Before we came on the air, Maree and I were talking about where I grew up, and our whole economy just about was based on tourism and what it meant to our community, and talk a little bit about how I know your philosophy is that tourism is a tool to help local residents live better lives. Talk about that philosophy a little bit.
Absolutely right. That's our purpose, to help people and communities live better lives. I wrote a book. Well, let me back up a little bit. I taught destination management and marketing at Temple University for 8 years at the master's level. Couldn't find any decent coursework, so I wrote my own and then decided that it should be a book, and it is now, called Tourism, Economic Development for Any Size Community. And the premise, Joe, is that every community has heritage. It starts with the people who settled in the landscape they found, and there are no two exact combinations of landscape and heritage anywhere in the United States. So that's the one thing that's unique to every single community. Why everybody doesn't focus on their heritage tourism is beyond my ability to understand, but it is the foundation of uniqueness. And in today's world, I just answered somebody on LinkedIn yesterday saying we're way beyond that. We have something for all or something for everybody stage. And so starting with that heritage, promoting it to visitors through an inspiring story, also helps community pride. So often we work with a small community and we do a comprehensive inventory of a 30-mile radius, and we go back to them with it and they say, we didn't know we had that. And so it begins a whole different conversation where you can start to really look. Now, I know you taught or you teach asset-based economic development. I wish there were a better word for that.
Yeah, you and me both.
Right. But starting with your heritage and the assets and resources that you already have, it essentially is asset-based development, but you don't talk to tourism people about that. But it's really focusing on beginning where you are and using those qualities to start increasing prosperity immediately. You know, you can be looking for other industries and all of that, but most often you can take that tourism asset resource inventory and combine it into itineraries, work with other communities surrounding and combine it with their resources, and you can do that pretty quickly. So it's foundational economic development that can happen in places that are wondering what to do next.
And I think, Maree, growing up in a small town that really relied a lot on tourism, many times the people that live in that community and all their lives don't realize the hidden jewels that we've got, and sometimes they're not hidden jewels. I told Maree that in the county where I lived most of my life, we had Shiloh National Military Park, which was the site of one of the largest battles of the Civil War, and we knew we had it, but we didn't do a whole lot to promote it. And on the other hand, there were hundreds of thousands of visitors coming in every day or every year to visit this park. And I felt like we never did the things we needed to do to capitalize on those visitors. They would come in, stay a few hours, tour the park, and then they were gone. So I guess my question to you is, where do you begin in taking that inventory of what your heritage is and what that community might promote?
Well, part of the inventory are the things that deliver economic development: lodging, restaurants, shopping, the attractions that are paid, etc. And so we confine the tourism and asset resource inventory to within the 30-mile radius to just the tourism assets. The things that bring economic development are confined only to the client destination, because you want people to stay, you want people to dine and shop. And once you look at an inventory like that, I'll give you an example. We worked with a community in North Carolina and did a comprehensive inventory of everything around them and realized that they had the basis for 6 different thematic trails. And so going to the various surrounding destinations and saying to them, would you like to participate in something like this? We can collectively bring economic development to all the communities. That's how you can start. We've done those many times that we just have to look at what's around. Just finishing up one for a tiny town in North Georgia, and realize that the communities around them, and they sit in the middle of a radius of 6 or 7 other towns, which is just amazing. They have heritage sites, they have arts, they have outdoor recreation, they have agritourism, and wineries. And the little town in the middle has some of all of that. But they just have hub and spoke, a tremendous amount of assets that they can combine. And then they have some other things that can be unique to them and bring people into their own town, because their downtown needs revitalization. But it's just by looking at what they have and then figuring out what's in the surrounding communities is basically how we start. We never do an itinerary with less than 2 nights stay, because that's what delivers the economic development to the town.
Talking about this small town in Georgia, and I'm sure there are many other places across the country that resemble this situation, how do you get all of those communities to work together, whether it's promoting, marketing, developing a strategy? That seems to me to be one of the most difficult things to do, is to bring all these folks to the table where they can focus on something that's good for the entire region.
You have to focus on the economic development it'll deliver. Never mind the hits on the website or the visitor numbers or any of the other stuff. But community leaders generally will look at, this will bring X number of dollars into our community, and we don't have to build any hospitals or schools or anything else, provide any extra services in order to bring those dollars in. So they get extra tax revenue that they can use however they need to. That's the most successful way that we've ever found that you can get people to the table.
Well, and states like Tennessee, Maree, where we are primarily a sales tax state, not only in state government, but in many ways local government, tourism is probably the greatest driver we've got.
Yeah. You're using someone else's money for your budget.
And I'm sure that's one of your selling points to local officials. I mean, you mentioned not having to provide the infrastructure like schools and other things, but these are dollars you can spend at home.
Right. And we, of course, always recommend that they be spent to enhance the lives of people in communities. Sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't.
Let me ask you this. Do you find, as people look at traveling today, and do they go to the internet? Do they have certain keywords they look for, and then it goes from there? And with today's technology, how has that evolved?
Well, everybody thinks that everybody's going to use AI to find their trips and put them together. It's not going to happen. Travel has an emotional component. And so you're looking for something that's going to move you or affect you in some way or the other. So there's still pretty traditional ways when you're just bouncing around the internet. You'll see some inspiring statement or that kind of thing. And then you begin a search for what you want to see and do. And so many DMOs just worry about heads and beds, and that's not where it is. The people looking for a trip look for the experience they want to have. And if a DMO is providing that information to them, then they'll start there, but they work down a hierarchy when they're putting their trip together. And you can be prompted. Yes, everybody goes to the internet, but you can be prompted in many, many, many different ways of finding the experience you want to do. And it's not all about just pictures either. People do still read copy.
And let's talk about the marketing piece. If a community has these assets and they've never really capitalized on them, what would be your advice to them on how you begin to market your community to those folks and get them to travel there?
Been there, done that many times. You take the inventory, and the websites of most small towns are horrendously bad. If you're really going to be a tourism marketer, you have to create a tourism website because everybody looks on the internet. Excuse me. You need to start with an inspiring story on that and a story that pulls people into the idea that they're going to visit while they're still reading. And that those are imperative. You can't just be putting posts on Facebook and all those disparate things. You really have to have a core of information that describes this is what our town's all about. And be specifically targeting. We say start with heritage because heritage tourism, heritage visitors are the most lucrative market in America. They stay longer, spend more, they're educated, and they won't pass up something just because budget. Most of them don't even do a budget per trip.
Give us an example of, when you talk about heritage tourism, give us an example of maybe some communities you've worked with and what their particular heritage was that they could capitalize on.
Oh, goodness. We're working with a county in northern New Jersey right now, and they have, and this is only 30 miles out of New York City, so I'm going to say it's going to sound pretty unusual. They have an incredible collection of historic farms in a landscape that looks like you're about 1,000,000 miles from New York City. Now they have astounding historic sites. They've got like 30 historic districts and all kinds of other stuff. But that whole peaceful side of the county is an entirely different thing than you would expect in the middle of what's basically just urban soup. That's one example. The town we're working in North Carolina, they are in a kind of the middle of a bubble that all they do, their surrounding neighbors are beaches, 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 beaches. They're next to a big sister city who has stopped promoting its heritage. So we said, you're right across the river. They have 5 hotels, have people stay here because the rates are lower. Go over there and just borrow their historic sites because the community itself it was founded in 1667, but didn't incorporate until 1989. And we thought that was a mistake when we read 1989. We thought surely 1889, 1789, going back to 1667. But we just said, take it and run with it, which I thought was a great idea.
Well, let me ask you this. We always get to the chicken and the egg, and the things I hear from communities that I've been able to visit is that, we have this great asset, but we have no hotels. We have no really unique restaurants. We have no unique shops. How do I know we're talking about destination and you talked about a 2-night stay. How does all that evolve? Does the hotels follow the marketing, or does the marketing then follow the hotels? How does that work?
If they really don't have any, I guarantee you they've got Airbnbs.
Okay.
Same destination we're talking about had 31 properties that were Airbnbs. And so and there's also VRBO. So in a place like that, normally, there will be some lodging accommodation stock. You just have to look for it. Hotels have a floor of population and traffic that they have to abide by. But you don't have to get a 5 or 6 floor hotel. You can do a 2-floor modestly priced one to start with, or renovate a historic building. I'm a preservationist by heart. Renovate a historic building and put accommodations in there. Use something that's just been sitting there. So there are many, many, many ways of getting past we don't have any hotels. There's many ways to have accommodations. And as far as restaurants, the more traffic you get, the more restaurants you're going to get.
Maree, what do you see today? We talk a lot about millennials, Gen X, Gen Z, all these different generations. Do you see that there is definitely a trend now to get out of the big city, to go find that unique spot that's out in rural areas? What's your thoughts on that?
It's different than I thought it would be, but it makes sense. Remember a long time ago, we talked about high tech, high touch. Well, Generation Z is so high tech that they can do everything in their lives with technology. They, more than the millennials, are the ones who are moving to these rural destinations because they can plan on, like the young people do, they can plan on a Thursday night and go on a Saturday, which those of us who've been around for a while generally take longer than that to make decisions. But I think it's a way of getting back to some authenticity and some high touch to really offset all the high tech. Millennials did that to some extent. Boomers are still the prime tourism destination. They never stop visiting.
Absolutely. Amen. That's right.
Yeah,
we never stop. They want us to, but we never stop.
Right. So somewhere in the middle, we had Generation X basically wanted to go to the big cities because most of them grew up in suburbs around them. But then gradually we've come back to the point, and especially with COVID, you couldn't really go to the big city. Rural tourism is projected to grow 10.3% annually compounded between now and 2030. So that's going to be a nice jolt.
Absolutely. Wow. Wow. Something I want to talk about, I know you are an expert on, and that's scenic byways. People just, we've got, I don't know if you've ever been on the Natchez Trace Parkway, okay?
Yep, driven hoping.
Yeah, well, I have too. And it's so unique. And I talk to people and in this area, and they'll say, what are you talking about, Natchez Trace Parkway? Talk a little bit about some of the most interesting scenic byways you've been on and maybe make some recommendations for our folks.
We've probably started more new ones in the last few years than any other organization. Scenic byways are a labor of love. They never have any money. You have to help them find it. They're always governed by committee, which takes forever. So they are not our bread and butter work, but I've been involved with them since the program started in 1991. So one of the more interesting ones is we were just contracted by a transportation commission to look at the volcanic legacy scenic byway All-American Road, which runs from Crater Lake National Park down to Lassen Volcanic National Park and then goes back up the loop again. It's 500 miles long.
Wow.
But it has 141 unique geologic features. It's part of the Pacific Rim of Fire. There is no place on Earth like those. They have obsidian fields and the rock structures that look like they fell off the moon. I mean, there's just nothing like those features in America. One recent one that we put together is in the third largest Amish community in LaGrange County, Indiana. It is the most authentic of Amish communities in the nation. And yes, I know I lived in Lancaster and they thought they were, but Lancaster, Pennsylvania now has 50,000 people, so it stopped being a small town a while ago. This is headquartered in a town of 782 people. And the buggy is the means of transportation. And so we took people on it's called the Amish Backroads Byway, and took people literally on a route where they could go past the pristine farms. And there's 375 Amish businesses in that county. So, of course, we tried to go past as many of those as possible to bring economic development. Few people know that the Scenic Byway program was created by the Federal Highway Administration to bring economic development to rural areas. That was the reason for it. And the Federal Reserve has put out the recent byways report, and they gave us a very nice 4-page full color spread, and worked through that whole idea that this is a way to bring rural economic development to places that industry just simply isn't ever going to move into. First of all, nobody's coming. It all starts with a visit because no business relocates without first coming to look at what the area looks like. There's no housing. And if you don't have housing, people there's nothing to move into. So a scenic byway is a way to get traffic through your community. And of course, they eat and shop and such along the way. So plus those gorgeous roads and landscapes are, at least to some extent, being protected. Once you lose it, you can't remanufacture it. And that's kind of the message that we keep bringing to people, that you really need to care for and treasure these things.
Well, we've got just a couple of minutes left. And one thing that I wanted to get your thoughts on, when I worked for the Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development, and I would visit communities and whether it could be tourism, it could be something else. And I was a firm believer that you invest in things that you're serious about. And many times I saw communities, they wanted to touch on areas, and they would allocate just a small amount of money in their budget, and I would tell them that's not an investment, that's a contribution is what that is. And I've seen, and I'll go back to the community I grew up in, Savannah, Tennessee, and years ago, we hired a full-time tourism professional. And this was not the same person that did the chamber work or the industrial recruiting, because I believe that if you want a return on your investment, you have to make that initial investment. And so many smaller rural communities, and I know it comes down to finances, but if you're really serious about it, you've got to take the necessary steps to put the foundation in place. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Most often when we get called on to do a strategic plan, we get called on to say, okay, what kind of staffing does this take? What kind of infrastructure staffing does it take? And then what kind of funding is this going to be? It can't be just a part-time, okay, we'll do this when we get to it position, because it never gets gotten to. There's always some drama going on. One of the things that we've started to do in the planning that we do, especially with community economic partners, is we help them find funding. So then there's really not any excuse for putting the plan in place. And the other thing is we create what we call an agile action plan. And some people really hate them because we illustrate what they have to do monthly, quarterly, and annually in order to reach the goals that they decided on in the time frame they decided on. And it brings a whole different level of responsibility when there you have it in front of you to say, okay, if you really want to reach this goal, here's exactly the actions that have to happen to get there. And then with those two things, usually it's easier for them to say, okay, if we're going to be serious about this, this is what we have to do.
Well, I agree. And the other things with those plans that I encourage communities to do is because, there's so many plans that go on the bookshelf, and is that, that these ought to be a living document. There ought to be some public reporting on a regular basis to bring everyone up to date on, number one, are you meeting your goals? Are you on the timeline? What accomplishments, what challenges you've run into. But fascinating discussion, Doc. I appreciate.
And Joe, you're absolutely right about, yes, everything you just said about regular reporting, et cetera. That's so important.
Well, it is. You've got to have accountability. And so these things just don't happen by themselves. And
they do not.
And I appreciate you so much. I know you do fascinating work, and hopefully in the near future we can get back together again and go more in depth on some of the subjects. But if we've got listeners out here today that would like to maybe contact you, how would be the best way? Do you have a website? How do they do that?
Well, phone number.
Okay.
267-897-5277.
Wow.
Phone's always on. And I'll give you my NTC email and not my community economic partners, because my married name is a little convoluted. Maree.Forbes@nationaltravelcenter.org. We're a B Corp. And so that allows us to tailor things and be a little bit more flexible. I love talking to people. Pick up the phone and call.
Fabulous. And I urge our listeners to take advantage of this. Lady has a lot of experience and a wealth of knowledge. And thanks so much for being on Rural Strong today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us on Rural Strong. If you found this helpful, share it and follow the show for more insights from rural leaders making a real difference. Until next time, stay rural strong.